haven't done like a foggy scene of that intersection yet. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to do that. Um, and I think this will be a good exercise in like a lot of like monochromatic approaches. There's not a lot of color. So in some ways, it can be a little bit simpler. So we're not making too many color choices. But I think
Yeah.
in this one, it'll be interesting to tackle like the uh, the background, the middle ground, the foreground, and the cars. It always interests me when there's cars in the scene. Just lends
Yeah.
a little bit of urban cityscape. And I like structures, and there's a chance to kind of play with some of the reflections um, and also like there's some places here where we can use dark colors to kind of connect a lot of areas together. Um,
Mm.
Oftentimes with the tires and the underneath the under portions of the cars, you can kind of treat them all as one connected dark stroke. So yeah, it'll look nice with the dark trunks of the trees, and we'll go over how to deal with the things in the objects in the distance. How do we make those look like they're in the distance, but also not just in the distance, but in the fog. So here it's slightly um, maybe simpler in that it's not really about, well, at least for me, it's not really about color as much as it is about richness in the tone. And while we could probably use like some blues here to make everything recede a little bit in the background, I think the point, um, the atmosphere produced by the fog is kind of what we're trying to get across. So let's see,
Mm.
let's tackle this, and I'm going to get started with some penciling here. I'm going to do pretty basic penciling um, because I'm actually eager to get into the painting.
I remember you talking last time and times before about connecting the dark and the shadows and the dark, connecting it before.
Yes, it's uh it's also kind of like a easy way to um, have the shadow elements of a scene kind of just work themselves out. Like, and you don't have to worry so much about like things start here, they end there. Um, and I think you'll get a sense once we start doing some of these darker areas. So I'm literally just capturing um, the angles of the bottoms of the cars, the wheels. There's a car here, and I'm gonna get, you know, the rough the rough angle of the other cars, the cars that are parked at the top, like the tops of the cars, so I know where kind of the highest point of most of these cars is. And the angles here, cars when they're parked, they tend to slope to the right a little bit. So we can kind of depict that, they're kind of like angled. The car is kind of when it's parked on the side.
Yeah,
And and then
because the street is crowned in the center for it to drain. So
right, right. Let me see what I want to capture here in terms of the crosswalk. It's very very you basically get a sliver of, or the perspective of the crosswalk. It makes it look like it's just a really thin sliver. Um, but the crosswalk, those white bars help us to give a sense of the direction and the perspective. So it's useful to
Yeah.
um, block those out and just to remember which way those lines are pointing in, and then capturing uh, some white blocks up here in front of us um, is good for that as well. Um, so I know there's a fence back here. I'm going to lightly just um, sketch in the top of that
Oh yeah,
fence.
I can hardly see the fence.
Yeah. And we know these trees, these great trunks. Actually, it's pretty big, actually. So,
It's interesting because the trees in the background are down, 20 or 30 feet. They're not at the same level as the trees on the street, is what I'm
right,
saying. So
right.
that's
So they're pretty big,
yeah, you're like at mid trunk. You're at mid trunk what you're looking at now instead of the
right,
base of the trunk. So
right. I don't want to make those too dark, and so I'm going to erase a lot of that. I just need some reference lines there. Um, and I'm also just going to draw like the top of this area here.
did you show your family the bicycle painting?
Yeah. They're like, "Oh, that's so old news." I think they actually forgot about that bike ride.
Well, now they remembered it again.
Yeah. I'm just gonna loosely put in here like this is where there are some um branches, and so and then rough like the structure of the trees here. So like painting parked cars on the street it's fun, and it can also be really labor intensive because if you really wanted to capture every single car in all of its with all of its shapes and sizes and contours, it's you could take a long time. Um,
Yeah.
but what I want to do, I think, in this session is kind of deal with them from the bottom up, and let's see how far that will take us. And
Mhm.
essentially, I'm gonna hold up my tablet. What I'm seeing looks very blue on your screen, actually, when I show this to you. But um, like basically, I'm gonna paint the darkest areas and kind of just connect them all at the bottom because they are pretty much connected at the bottom
Yeah.
along the whole row.
Because it's foggy and winter, the colors are muted. The shapes are a little bit muted, so
Yeah,
it's not like they're standing out
that's right.
individually. Yeah.
So, going with the normal sequence of light to dark, I'm gonna deal with the background, and because the background here obviously is the lightest part, and in some ways that makes it pretty straightforward in terms of what things we're going to paint in which order. So everything, including the sky, um, and the trees that are enshrouded in mist or fog is going to be, I'm going to use a pretty light gray first of all to do the whole background. And then um, as that's drying, I will start to put in a darker shade of that same whatever gray it is, and start to like kind of bring out the trunks, the most prominent trunks, and then let's see how that goes. So
Okay.
I'm gonna create a gray using the ultramarine and my burnt sienna. And I'm gonna dilute it a good amount. And I'm actually I'm not going to worry too much about like reserving white space. You know, there are some spots here that um, are the headlights that, you know, it's pretty bright actually. I'm going to put a circle, I'm going to put circles
The
there.
crosswalk, maybe the crosswalk.
Crosswalk, yeah.
But the trunks will be so dark that the background doesn't have to be white. It can be that diluted gray.
Yeah. And I'm going to use a big flat brush here.
They're gonna do wet on wet. Oh, a big brush, like a paintbrush.
I think yeah, I'm gonna wet the background. This water, actually, it's a little dirty. Yeah. It's not as clean as I wished it could have been. I think I had some pigment on this brush earlier, and
Uh-huh.
that's probably why. So the advantage of this kind of brush is you can go back really fast and have very even strokes and quickly kind of fill in things that you need to fill in.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm carefully avoiding those areas that I want to have a little bit brighter, like the crosswalk blocks.
So you're leaving them dry.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go through right here and just try to kind of weave in and out, fill in those areas. Yeah. And it's okay if we actually get this pigment all over everything because the brightest values even on the windows of the cars, um, is pretty close to the value of the sky. So,
Right.
all right, so that should be the last time I'm going to touch this, use that brush. I'm going to change out this water. All right. So there are some colors that are on the cars, right? The cars are not all just black. For the
Yeah.
most part, they're pretty hard. It's hard to distinguish. There's like kind of there is a red car in there. Actually, the one that's parked in the double parked one is a red car. We could potentially use
Yeah.
some red there. But like I said before, I'm gonna worry about the bottom. I'm gonna start with the bottoms of the cars and just kind of um, actually I'm gonna use a brush that has a fine point like I did before, where it's larger and it's gonna force me to um, like this brush. Yeah, this round one is not as doesn't come as great of a point as this number 10. The number 6
Mm,
is not as pointy as the number 10. I'm going to use this number
okay.
10 because I want to kind of go in and out and um like basically weave through each car. So
Okay.
let me get some more paint here. All right, let's see how we can do this. And we're going to end up, I'm going to start at the far end and I'm going to go like this, basically doing a zigzag up and down, and then
Mm,
ending up the last car. The last car will be kind of like this. So really, really abstract, but we'll go back in and touch those up a little bit more.
that took a lot of courage.
All right, I'm going to do the same over here. just getting certain elements of the cars as it'll serve as a reference point for me later when I go back in.
Hmm. So you when you're doing that, you're are you really focusing on values,
Well, I'm actually keeping in
the
mind
structure?
the shape that I
Yeah.
see,
Hmm.
and kind of making split-second decisions as to what I want to represent. And
Hmm.
yeah, so as that dries, well, I'm not going to let it dry completely because I want to go back. I want to go in and I'm gonna. I see a little blue in this in the reflections of this car that's closest to us, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna actually bring in some blue there. Um, and obviously this is nowhere near exact, and um, it's okay because this is all going to dry a little bit lighter, and I'm going to be able to go back in and make some more refining touches to it. And I'm going to add some red to that car. Um,
Hmm.
so again, pretty rough, and that's okay. I'd rather have things blend together and kind of crash into each other and um, mix than just have everything be kind of separated.
Hmm. So the color's just making a little differentiation right now.
Yeah. And I'm gonna, just for fun, I'm gonna add a splash of yellow on a couple of these, few of these cars over here where there's like a reflection from the headlights. Um, Even though it's not exactly a yellow that we see, it might give the impression of a reflection.
Hmm.
It's funny how, these shapes, as rough and abstract as they are, we immediately can spot them as cars.
Yeah, it really is. Especially the red one and the blue one,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, pretty cool.
All right. Now I'm going to go and do these trunks in the distance. And I'm going to
So
make
now you're
it,
back to the Payne's gray you mixed. I mean, the gray that you mixed up.
yeah.
Is it still a little wet from when you wet it with the big brush?
It's pretty dry now. Um, the paper was buckling a lot, so I just decided to let it dry and then go back into it. So you kind of have to like while you're pulling it up, you also have to like ease up on it so it kind of tapers more, and that's I'm not doing a great job of that, but it's kind of a tricky skill
Mm.
when you're not leaning on something, you know.
All right.
In some ways, it's like Chinese calligraphy.
Mm-hmm. I love Chinese calligraphy.
Mm,
How that like it's like captures that energy in between the beginning and the end. It's just
mm, yeah. So this background, it's a relatively straightforward exercise of just getting some believable trunks and lines going. A lot of it's going to be covered up anyway. So not too terribly crucial to like get like certain type of accuracy. Um, but obviously we want there to be some depth. So different size with different thicknesses of the branches and the trunks will help convey some distance even back there. So,
Mhm.
and there's so many fine twigs and branches in the background there. We're not gonna like brush in every single one of those. What we could do is kind of do a little wash um, to simulate the effect of lots of branches grouped together. When they're grouped together, they almost become like a light, like a wash.
Mhm.
I'll show you that in a second. The trick is to keep your brush just wet enough so that it maintains a point,
Mm.
but not too wet that it introduces too much water into this because it's a little damp, but um, so yeah, it should be clear which ones are like closest. All right, and then I'm gonna do uh, there's an area back on the left side here where there's like kind of a crown of of it might be leaves, I guess. But we can simulate that by just doing a little area here where I'm gonna just fill it in, dropping in pigment into basically a wet
Mhm.
on wet technique.
Mhm. Is this the mid? Are you doing the mid range now,
The
or is that
what?
still the?
Oh, it's still the
Are you doing
background.
the
I'm
still
just
the
doing
foreground
I'm
background?
doing some of the these areas in the back. There are these parts like here in the back where when you have all of those twigs and leaves together,
Yeah.
it's almost like it looks like a bush. And it's
Hmm.
more effective, I think, to create that by doing a wash, wet on wet.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't really want like really hard edges on those, so I'm smoothing those out. All of this will be covered up eventually, but
Yeah.
it helps lend some realism to it.
Mm.
We're kind of blending stuff in. Um, yeah, so I think I'm ready to move on to the trees that are um, the trees that are here in the middle ground. I'll call that the middle ground, even though they're kind of
Okay.
they're still beyond the cars, like they're past the cars, or maybe they start mid block and then
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes
So
sense. Yeah.
um, what I will do
So
there,
you were doing the trees that were in the Cabrini Woods. Now you're doing the trees that are along 190th.
right? So I think what we can do there. Sorry, I think I bumped the camera. Okay, so
Yeah. No.
um, I'll do the same technique to do the foliage because they're all pretty. The foliage is it's pretty much like one tone to me, and it's a very cool green. So I'm gonna go with my trusted Perylene green as a start. And if I add a little bit of Payne's Gray to that, it'll dull it a little bit more.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe too much. Actually, I'm gonna put in a little bit of light, the warmer green here and see what happens.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think because there is a little bit more, yeah, there's some lighter areas to that. And I think, I'm gonna try this color. I added some sap green to it to make it just slightly warmer. And I'm gonna clean my brush off and then start with some washes here. I'm gonna do this tree. So again, I'm kind of roughly wetting the whole boundaries, the territory of that tree. And then I don't want to introduce more water into that. I'm going straight, I wiped my brush off and I'm going in with the pigment and I'm just going in to like well within the boundaries of that water I just put down. So it'll be a soft, diffuse effect. I'm going to do the same on this side. This way, it's more effective at communicating the trees that are in front of everything. It's because it allows things in the background to still kind of poke through in terms of you can tell there's still light coming through as opposed to like going in and using a brush to like try to get each like cluster of branches and so at least this way there's a rough outline of the of the tree that we can work with, and we can add some more detail, like we can we can add um, a cooler shade of green on top of these. Um, and since while they're wet, I'm going to go ahead and drop in some cooler tones. I'm also just kind of paying attention to how the paper is reacting, and sometimes this when we're dealing with multiple layers, it's easy to get some unsightly effects. And so, part of your job is to just learn how to manage that and cope with it. And, sometimes it'll work to your advantage. Sometimes it looks like a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give all that area above some time to rest right now. I'm going to treat the roadway. I'm going to try to avoid the ground where there's some reflection from the headlights of this car. Let's see how I'm going to just go wet on dry. Um, going to use Payne's Gray. There's a bit of a greenish tint actually actually, you know what? I'm just going to go back with Perylene Green and the Payne's Gray. See how I end up using a lot of the same colors over and over again.
Yeah.
So that does also shape how my paintings look. So I'm gonna go like this. You know what? Well, kind of screwed that up a little bit, but we'll deal with it.
As far as the reflection of the headlights, or how do
Yeah,
you feel like?
yeah, and also I just, I made it really dark. So I'm
Oh, I see. Like, cause the reflection, it's yeah, I see. Yeah.
yeah, but before it dries, I can go back in. I think I can resolve it. Just need to finish this, and then I'm gonna go in and actually just lift. There. All right. Feel better about that. All right. The top part is dry, pretty dry again, and I'm going to start laying down some of the trunks and um, the other some of the branches here in the midground. Um, so I'm using a darker mixture of that, and I'm gonna go here. Yeah, it didn't really seem that much darker, but now, okay, now it's better. There's actually some places up here I need to do that wash trick to get like the crowns of those trees. Oh, I guess I already did that. Sorry. Um, kind of just blending these together because there's a lot of darkness in those parts right there. So yeah, I kind of have to you have to get a richer mixture of the paint to effectively make it darker.
Mm-hmm.
Here I'm going to fill in some parts of the trunk because it's denser foliage. All right. And then I'm going to treat the trunks, the trees in the foreground, and I'm going to use the same brush. Definitely going to load it with much more saturated Payne's gray. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of brown or my burnt umber because I want there to be some color, like to show some local color of that surface.
Yeah.
So that it's not all just really dark gray, black looking. So I'm gonna start. There's actually a pretty brown tint to that. Which might ring more true anyway, because, you know, as these are closer to us, we can see more of the true color of the trunks.
Yeah, I think the warmth of the color helps with the perspective.
Yeah, right? Normally you're right, because normally it is supposed to be um, closer is warmer to us, right? I mean,
Yeah,
closer to us is going to be a warmer um, temperature. So you're right in that for this particular scene, like if it was sunny and if the sun was behind us, we ought to be able to see the rich browns of these trees. And I can always go back in and add, darker some darker tones
yeah.
here anyway to get some roundness and um, dimensionality to these. So whenever the paint starts to, I'm using it up, I can add a little bit of water, but that will dilute it a little bit. So I'm going to get more pigment, get a little bit more brown, burnt umber, which is my brown here. And there's not a lot of stuff going on in the foreground on the left side, but
Yeah.
there is a bit of Chinese calligraphy, you know, um, skill needed here because uh, Chinese calligraphy has a lot of these um, hand movements that make it so good for like painting branches and organic,
Yeah.
organic curves in nature, and so I'm gonna add a little bit darker tones here. As we go up in the sky, it's gonna get so some parts will be dark because it's backlit, so our eyes can't really discern the color that's in the shadow in front of us. All right, getting closer to the end. Um, as that is all drying a bit, I'm gonna go back into the cars, see what I can do here just to bring out some of the shapes. What is worth trying to, you know, refine. Some of it, honestly, I like how it's, just very abstract, and I'm actually just using the same color here. Some of it's just so abstract that if I try to, I risk confusing if I try to be too much more refined on some of these parts, but it's worth tackling it's worth tackling the parts that are closest to us, like
Yeah.
physically, with a little bit more detail. So, um, because once you can get that initial, once you've filled in the details on that initial object that's closest to us, then the brain will fill in the rest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
for
I
example,
know what those are because I know what this is. Yeah.
yeah. So like some of these darkest areas, I'm just going over again. I'll go in with a
Yeah.
finer brush in a second, but yeah, see how some of these structures really the mind just fills it in. You know, these black marks are the side view mirrors.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes all it takes is just getting the very back of the car, getting the back wheels, getting the you know, a sliver of the front wheel, a sliver of what's going on in the car in front of it, and then just kind of repeating that a little bit, and then yeah, making sure there's a shadow down here that really helps complete the impression of a car.
Yeah. Sure does.
Yeah, so you know, again, just making those dark areas connect in the beginning was actually helpful for purposes of just keeping track of where the things are, but also um, it helps, it serves as a like a map. Um, and it helps, I believe it helps the viewer fill in the information needed.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to just do a few little areas here where there's some foliage. You know, see, it's to me that's a lot more effective than like just trying to painstakingly fill in, you know, all these individual twigs and branches. And again, it's
Hmm.
about for me, I squint and I look at like what is the overall effect that I see. So to me,
Hmm.
it looks like kind of ghostly like um, I don't know how to describe it, but I think you know what I mean.
I do, yeah. It's like a thicket.
A thicket.
It seems like there's some warmth in the 190 trees from the leaves that have been retained, some at least the photo that I'm looking at. It gives it some kind of reddish brown, those oak leaves.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can see that too. Let's see what happens when I add a tiny bit of red. Um, I'm going to try the anthracenoid red. Do you mean in this area?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like they retain all the leaves haven't fallen. They're still there from the so
Right,
there's some fall color. There's actually some fall color even though it's winter.
right. Yeah, I like that. And I think to touch it up, I'm going to add some bigger splotches of green. Um, of the cool green, just so it's like we're blocking the background a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Still letting some of that red shine through. Yeah, I think that um, conveys, this sense of depth that we see in the fog. Um, and I think, I will make a few like dark, like I'll add a few like thin branches here and there. Maybe I'll use, yeah, I think this is a pretty thin brush. Maybe like something it'll indicate that it's more in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want too much, like too many fine lines, like too many details. Um, so yeah, I'm just kind of, yeah, even like just taking your dirty, not dirty, but like semi, your brush with just a little bit of pigment on it to add a little bit of,
Mm-hmm.
do you call it bramble? I don't know. Like,
Yeah, bramble. Yeah,
okay,
brambles. Yeah, bramble thicket.
like semi-dry. Can kind of do the trick too. Yeah, I hope this was instructive. It was fun to do this one.
Very much. They always are.
Just a couple more touch-ups here. just to make sure the shape of the car stands out here.
Well, you're lifting right now, aren't you?
I am lifting a little bit, yeah. Realize I want the top of the car to shine here. It's a little bit more convincing that way. Yeah. Lift out a little bit in the window so there's some reflection. Even on this car, and actually where the red is.
Mhm.
And then I'm just going to add a little bit of detail in the very front. The very front of this. Just adding some of that green.
Mhm.
And then and that might be too much. So sometimes these lines they're too stark. So you can like dry off your brush, kind of go over it and smudge it a little bit.
Mhm.
And, it's just to give, it's not that I'm trying to get every crack in this picture. It's just I grabbed onto something that helps to show the perspective. Um,
Mhm.
Same with these. There's a couple of lines here that I can try to lift up. Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm gonna just really quickly try to get a hint of the fence in the back. Um,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be careful not to be too, um, I'm not gonna go crazy with it.
Yeah, I can't even see it in this
Yeah.
photograph. But I know it's there. It's a nice wrought iron fence.
Uh-huh.
There's
You,
also there's also one sign in there that's up next to the
oh, you're right.
tree closest in the foreground.
You're right.
I don't know if you need that, but signs can really help locate. That one's a little indistinct. So, well, I like the fence. The fence was that a lamppost?
It's actually a sign, a one-way sign.
Oh, that's the sign. Oh yeah, sign. Right. Okay. Yeah, I see that
So I'm
now.
just gonna hint.
Oh, I see the fence. Now that once you painted the fence, then I saw it. Hilarious.
I'm just hinting at the sign now. So I'm gonna kind of
Yeah.
um making an indistinct. When that dries in a second, I will add like an arrow to it. But oh,
Mm-hmm.
actually, you know what? There's also there's these orange um like these orange what do you call it? Like caution
Inverted rectangle or inverted squares look like.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that dries. Um It's too, well, too, I don't want it to stand out too much. So I'm just putting it down, and then I'll probably just take off a bunch of that just so it's just barely, if someone looks closely at it, they can tell there's a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.